Good afternoon, everyone. We will begin the program in about 2 minutes. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this event organized by the University Science Malaysia School of Social Sciences and the De La Salle University Southeast Asia Research Center and Hub. I'm Dr. Fernando A. Santiago Jr., the director of the Southeast Asia Research Center and Hub, also known as SEARCH, and I'm very glad that you are joining us this afternoon. Now, as an introduction, please allow me to read the abstract of this afternoon's webinar. So the title of our webinar is Beyond Categorization, Stories of Unshelteredness in Southeast Asia. Homelessness denotes loss of home and absence of shelter. The homeless as a group are often associated with deviance, laziness, personal failure, addicts, character flaws, mental illness, and many other socially undesirable qualities. It is not uncommon that homeless people are punished and criminalized with vagrancy laws and destitute person acts, especially in colonial and post-colonial countries, as they are perceived as dangerous others. On the other hand, homelessness is also correlated to systemic failure, such as unaffordable housing, high rents, market failure, and state failure, which calls for intervention. Yet state-sponsored shelter for the homeless tend to be highly structured and paternalistic. Many homeless people shun shelters as they perceive being placed in a shelter as an infringement of their autonomy and also as a social stigma. This webinar brings together scholars from Southeast Asia for a conversation on shelter, homelessness, and housing policy. This abstract was prepared by Dr. Por Hyung Hong of the University Science Malaysia School of Social Sciences. Now, I have the pleasure to introduce our moderator. Our moderator is Associate Professor and former Dean of the School of Social Sciences from 2012 to 2015, and a lecturer of Development Planning and Management at the University Science Malaysia. She teaches undergraduate courses in development studies such as land development and administration, local government and municipal laws, rural and regional development, and development management. She obtained her PhD in city and regional planning from Cardiff University, the UK, and Masters of Science in Development Policy Planning from Swansea University, UK. Her research interests include housing, urban development, development management, and poverty. She has written several articles and papers on affordable housing and urban poverty. Her current research project analyzes affordable housing issues from a multidimensional approach. She's also a member of the Persatuan Sains Social Malaysia, or the Malaysian Social Science Association. So without much further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Noor Malina Malek.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fernando. Very good evening to everyone. We are here today to listen to our three distinguished scholars presenting their knowledge and experience on shelter, homelessness, and housing policy from the Southeast Asian perspective. First of all, let me introduce our speakers. Our first speaker, Boonlert Visetpricha, is an assistant professor at Thammasat University in the Faculty of Sociology and Anthropology. Before becoming a lecturer, he has engaged with several social movements for more than 10 years. He was the first one in Thailand who started organizing a street homeless people organization in Bangkok since 2002. His book, World of Homeless People in Thai, received award for distinguished academic books in 2002. Boonlert graduated with a PhD degree in anthropology at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. His dissertation, Structural Violence and Homelessness, Searching for Happiness on the Streets of Manila, the Philippines, 2015, is the result of his intensive fieldwork in Manila for 14 months. Our second speaker, Rusaslina Idrus, is an educator based in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. She is trained as a social anthropologist and a senior lecturer in gender studies at University of Malaya, where she teaches courses on gender justice, environment, and development. She is an active researcher on issues concerning marginalized communities in Malaysia. Her research focus includes indigenous studies, refugee studies, subaltern history, and issues concerning citizenship rights. Together with her students, Rusaslina coordinates Kedai Jalanan an organization that provides services for the homeless and underserved communities in Kuala Lumpur since 2015. She is coordinator for the upcoming service learning module for her faculty and is a recipient of national and university level awards for community engagement. Our final speaker, Marlon De Luna Ira, an associate professor of the Behavioral Sciences Department, De La Salle University, Manila. He completed his AB Sociology and an MS in Human Settlements Development from the Asian Institute of Technology, Thailand, and a PhD on Development Studies at De La Salle University. Dr. Ira has extensive teaching and professional experiences in disaster resilience, solid waste management, gender, and local governance. Dr. Ira had worked with the Philippine government in various capacities. He has served as Program Associate of the Asian Disaster Preparedness Center, Thailand, Operation Manager Corporate Network for Disaster Response, Country Coordinator of the Capacity Building for Asia on Resilient Education Project funded by Erasmus, consultant to UN World Food Programme, UNIDO, UN Environment, and national government agencies and local government units. He is the country correspondent, International Association for Community Development, President, Local Governance Training and Research Institution Philippine Network, Executive Vice President, Solid Waste Management Association of the Philippines, and board member, Philippine Sociological Society, to name a few. Now, each speaker is given 20 minutes to present, and we will have a Q&A session at the end. I would appreciate if all speakers could complete your presentation within the time given, and I will alert you when you have reached the time limit. Now, without further ado, let me now invite our first speaker, Dr. Boonlert Visetpricha, to deliver his presentation entitled Reflection on the Dynamics of Knowledge and the Movements of Homeless People in Thailand. So Dr. Boonlert, if you're ready, you may begin now. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a very nice introduction. So, and good afternoon, everyone. Very nice to meet everyone to share my experience. Today, I will present about the homeless people about homeless people in Bangkok. I'm going to change. Okay. Okay. So I will reflect about my experience to work with the homeless and also the support the group of the homeless in the past 20 years. So at first, I will give you some very brief information about the homeless people in Bangkok. According to the survey in 2016, it's about 5 years before. This research is conducted by cooperation between NGO, government office, and also several academics and student health to conduct this research. There are 1,300 homeless persons in Bangkok. So compared to the amount of the population in Bangkok, about more than 8 million. So compared to other countries, I think because I was in Philippines before, compared to the Philippines, the amount of homeless in Bangkok is quite less than in Manila. So, and according to the gender, majority of them more than 80% is male, as we already know. Maybe in many countries it's the same. And the average age of the homeless people, about almost 60% is between 40 to 59 years, and about the 2/3 of them come from the province. And how long they are on the street, the survey showed that the average length of time homeless is about 9 years. So, and then my present will say about the before 2001, before we work with the homeless, what happened, how the situation of the homeless, and then we work with them. And compared to the second part, I will talk compared to presently, how the situation of the homeless in Bangkok is different. First, I will say that before 2001, nobody in Thai society know and understood homeless people. So the homeless situation is quite a new phenomenon, and many people at that time perceived the homeless people as the same as a vegan or beggar. In Thai, we have the terms "คนเล่ร่อน" in literally mean the wanderer. So we think that these people is a kind of person wanderer roaming in the city, and have the image that these people have the mental image, have a long hair, they don't take care of themselves like that. And sometimes, as Dr. Fernando said, they have some bias to these people that they maybe commit a crime. So this is the bad image toward bad attitude toward homeless people. The important incident that lead to the organize the homeless people is in 2001. At that time, because the Bangkok Metropolitan Administration or BMA announced to prohibit people to sleep to sleeping at the Grand Palace Field since August 1st. And I'm not sure how many of you have been in Bangkok, and you will know that we have the a beautiful Grand Palace, and also in front of Grand Palace, we will it has the Grand Palace field that many people sleep there. So at that time, every night more than 100 people sleep at that time, and the BMA want to beautify this area, so therefore they prohibit people to sleep there. So at that time, Human Settlement founded, and at that time, because nobody understand about the homeless people, always think about them as the people with mental illness, and think that the Department of Social and Public Welfare already have the institute to take care of them. But in fact, as Dr. Fernando said at the beginning, that many people, I would say that more than 90% of homeless people don't want to go to this area because of two main reasons. The first, in this area, they feel that they're arrested to this area. They don't have the freedom to going around to earn to live by themselves as they live outside. And also in this institution, I visit this area also, and I found that the government officials told me that more than 70 to 80% of them have the mental illness. So many homeless who don't have mental illness, they feel that they don't want to live and mix with these people. So that's why they don't want to come to this area. Therefore, and also the homeless people can live outside, as you see how they do study. It's about they try to do odd job. Also that although their job cannot earn a lot of money, but they can survive. As we know, by many countries, we have the many people collecting recyclable items. But there are another odd job. For example, these people, they sell the plastic sheet for the people who go to see the movie outside in Thailand. There are a lot. And also these people, they sell the balloon for the temple festival. There are many temple festivals in Thailand. So these people, they can earn their job that by themselves, and they don't want to be arrested to the in the bureaucrat style shelter. Therefore, when I work at that time, we try to organize the homeless people, and then the first thing that I learned is that many of them afraid to talk about themselves. Many of them realize that they were discriminated, and therefore the people have the negative attitude toward them. So my job is, at that time I still young, at least in this picture, my job is to encourage people, let them that they have to talk about themselves, let them to realize in their light that they have to talk with the public, to ask for the government that they are the poor, they are the poorest among the poor, that the government should support them. So that's why they have to explain why they become homeless. And then some homeless people, they confident to speak to the public, and this situation lead to the movement, the first movement of the homeless people. This is the first time that at that time nobody think that the homeless people can unite and go to the BMA office to ask that we don't want to prohibit us to sleep at Sanam Luang. If you do that, you need to provide something for the homeless people, not just not just kick me out, but don't prepare anything for them. So at that time, the government prepared just a simple tent like this, but also we try to encourage the homeless to talk about. And then we prefer like this. When I work with the homeless, I use this paper to explain with the homeless. Previously, they sleep outside. And now the government just prepared a tent for them. But we try to ask for the alternative shelter that at first they can sleep inside. They can take a bath. They can take care of themselves. And then some people might want to go to apply job again. This is just like a starting. Let them to have the starting point again. And then we call. So I will say that to summarize, we say that at that time we try to ask for the government to provide an alternative shelter for the homeless people. So that, and what I mean the alternative is mean it should be managed flexible in accordance with the life of the homeless people, not the bureaucratic style of the government shelter. And also the location should be not far away from the site that the homeless people live already. So we need to find some area in the city that they can go to this place easily. And then at that time, at the same time, I was a master degree student in anthropology. So I wrote my thesis on the world of the homeless. This is the title of my book. Actually, it's one book, but it's published third edition already, so 3 times already. So it means this book was read by the widely in Thai society. So it's being the new perspective to understand the homeless people that we should not should look at them as a criminal, but try to explain that there are many factors that push these people to become homeless. And when they become homeless, how they can survive? As I said, they can survive by doing many odd jobs. Don't need to be the criminal, and that people have the negative image attitude toward them. And also later, the BMA and another organization, the government of it is Community Organization Development Institute, or CODI. I heard that many of you work on the community development. You might know already about the CODI in Thailand. The agree to support, to set alternative shelter for the homeless people is managed by the homeless and supported by NGO, by the Human Settlement Foundation. That is the first successful of the movement, but it takes time. It's not. It's success a little bit by little. So I will compare with presently what we the situation of the homeless like now is different from 20 years ago when I started working with them. The first thing that I would like to summarize is that nowadays homeless people are treated much better than before 2003 or before 20 years ago. Like in this picture, this guy is Uncle Dam or Lung Dam in Thai. He talked with he is the Prime Minister of the Social Development and Human Security. It shows that the social status of the homeless, they are someone that the government, high-ranking government official have to listen to them. And we also that it's happened many times that the high-ranking official admit, although the minister would like to visit the homeless shelter, that, oh, how about you to show, at least to show that they're concerned about the homeless people. And also when the government have to want to launch any program, any policy, need to listen to the homeless. So the meeting between the representative of the homeless people and the government office is happen regularly. Maybe it's regularly, even though it's not the result of the meeting is not good every time, but at least they accept the participation of the representative of the homeless people. I will show how it's different, the situation better now. Another thing is that the government allocate $4 million to NGO, mostly for the Human Settlement Foundation, to set up an alternative shelter in 4 provinces, in Bangkok, in central Thailand, and in Pathum Thani is in suburb of Bangkok, and in northeast at the Khon Kaen province, and in the northern Thailand is in Chiang Mai province. 4 million is quite a big money that it brings a new perspective that they allow the NGO to spend the government office to set the shelter and manage in the way that flexible enough for the homeless people to comfortable to get into this service. So we show this. So as I show in this picture, this is quite a bit a nice shelter in Chiang Mai province. You will see that there are in space inside there are located in different style in accordance with different types of the homeless people. For some people, they have to sleep together in the cold sleeping space, but for the people who already improve themselves, they can have the private space like this in this picture, and also on the roof, they prepare it is on the roof, not on the ground, it's on the roof. They allow the people to do the garden that can become the ethical income for them. This also another shelter in Pathum Thani province. Also, they have a space like this in the building that separate to small room, 4 or 5 people sleep together. A big is maybe about the 10 persons sleep together, and also have the private for the people, particularly for the family homeless. Also, we can see that peacefully the non-government organization and volunteer to work with the homeless have increased many organizations. The first organization that I already said is the Human Settlement Foundations, but as I said, mostly they try to organize the people and prepare the shelter for the homeless people. And moreover, they do more than that. For example, they help the homeless people to in terms of in terms of economics, to help them to have their own junk shop that they can buy and sell the junk shop in the fair price for the homeless people. And this picture also important. It is about the support the homeless people to get an ID card, because many homeless people they left their house for a long time. Therefore, they lose their ID card. When they don't have ID card, it's difficult to get any assistance from the government. They cannot get any benefit, such as for the senior citizen, they cannot get. For the people who have the handicap, the disabled people, they cannot get the disabled benefit also. And also the important is about the free healthcare. That is an important program in Thailand. So this is another important work also. And the second organization that work with the homeless is the Miller Foundations. There are many programs in by the Miller Foundation, and but one program is about the homeless people. At first, they just start giving food for the homeless people. But then they found that it's not enough just to giving food daily like this or once a week like this. They try to help the homeless better. For example, this picture, the program just launched last year, is to support the homeless in terms of giving job for the homeless people, that they can earn money and then they can spend this money to rent. This is another way to help the homeless people to overcome homelessness. Another organization is Isla Chon Foundation. Isla Chon in Thai it means independent persons. Also support the homeless people, mostly giving food once a week, and also visit homeless on the street and have the first aid to help, like for the healthcare. Then, so another way that I can say that it can indicate that the social status of the homeless people is better is nowadays we can see that small media always present the homeless person's opinions to reflect the voice of the poorest. Previously, nobody listened to them, nobody cared them and act like to discuss them. But nowadays, when the government launched a policy and there are some kind of criticize, even the media want to criticize that this policy is good enough for the poor, or the poor can benefit from this policy or not. The media always ask the opinion of the homeless people. So this also is indicate that there are someone, in society. They are not nobody as before. And also even though the CSR, the program of the many private company, uh, uh, the corporate social responsibility also always launch the program to support the homeless, such as giving food, or build something, or donate something to the homeless people. Even though I think, even though during the COVID-19 outbreak last year, many people are also concerned about the homeless people, and you will see that many people always take care, giving food to the homeless people. A lot of people give food for the homeless. However, in the last section, I try to summarize that how is different, the situation different between before about the 10, 20 years ago and today. I would say that although the social status of the homeless in Bangkok is better, the understanding of the public toward homeless people is better. Many research, many news always talk about the homeless people. However, I think nowadays the situation is that both NGO, government, and also academic, I blame myself too, that we still has no answer yet that how to help the homeless people to overcome homelessness in the long term. I will show that what is the limitation of the program that I talked previously. First thing, we realize that the giving food alone is not enough, but many Thais still want to give food for the homeless. But just give food to the homeless, it just keep them on the street, cannot help them to overcome homelessness. That we need to realize about that. And the second one is, I said that the shelter for the homeless organized by NGO is is a helpful, accessible for the people, but it's still limited because there are a few shelters that people can use it. A lot of people, it's about the 10% of the homeless people can use this shelter, particularly in Bangkok, because only one shelter in Bangkok, but more than 90% of homeless people still sleep outside because the amount is limited. And the the most difficult is the location. The government, it's very hard to find the road to set the shelter inside the city that people can easily access. Another option that we said is about the providing job to the homeless. That can help for some people, but for some people, this policy cannot help also. And we need to manage about that. I will say that this picture need to manage because amount of the government do not support this policy that is worked by the NGO only. So the NGO get donation from the public and then will create this program. However, as many people said about one of the reasons that create the homeless people is the high rent. So although these people they get wage from their work, but their income is still small.
Sorry,
Based on
Dr.
their small in
Chair?
on their
Yes,
okay
we have 1 more minute to wrap up. Sorry.
okay for based on their small income, therefore they can rent a room that very low quality. So I think we need to think in terms of both to help in terms of housing plus in terms of the job. Help them to think about job only is not enough. One thing that I will show that this picture that in Thai we don't have the real answer yet how to help these people. This picture will show that during the COVID-19 outbreak in Bangkok, the homeless people run away from the Minister of Social Development and Human Security, who invite them to stay at the government shelter. So it's ridiculous that the government want to ask them, but the people run away from them. So this is the government, although they support NGO, but another way they still work in the conservative way. So my conclusion is that the situation of homeless in Bangkok is better than in the past 20 years, but it still need to think how to help them to overcome homelessness, not just keep them on the street. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Boonlert, for a very insightful and profound presentation. Now I would like to invite our second speaker, Dr. Rus Aslina Idrus, to deliver her presentation entitled Lessons from Jalan Panggung. If you're ready, Dr. Rus Aslina, please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Madina. And first of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for this event, USM School of Social Sciences and De La Salle University's Southeast Asia Research Center and Hub in particular Dr. Paul Hyung Hong and Dr. Fernando Santiago Jr., who sort of are the um, people who spearheaded this panel today. I'm really honored to be among people who has done a lot of research and um, not just research, but also social activist work among people who experience homelessness. And I'm really excited to be able to learn and share as well within this forum. My work in with people who experience homelessness actually started about 5 to 6 years ago. Previously, also I had volunteered with soup kitchens, but it was in 2015 that some students and I started a project called Kedai Jalanan So I'll talk a little bit about that work and also some of the lessons and stories that I've learned from my time with people who experience homelessness in Jalan Pangong. And I also want to say, a lot of the work that I'm doing have been mostly in the service, providing services, and also in the service learning and community engagement work that we do. But I'm only beginning to sort of think and write academically about this. I feel like this panel is kind of nudging me a little bit towards that way. So I'm really grateful for this. Thank you, Dr. Fernando, too, for helping me with this slide. So if I can go to the next slide. So Jalan Pangong is right in the middle of the city center, the heritage center of Kuala Lumpur. For those who are familiar with KL, it's very close to Pasar Seni, Central Market, which is sort of the tourist hub, and just a parallel street away from the famous or infamous Petaling Street, sort of what we also know now as Chinatown. So it's sort of right in the middle of the city. And this is where we have our Kedai Jalanan. We can look at the next slide, where students and I set up a what we call Kedai Jalanan actually means street store. So we set it up so that people can come and choose clothes and toiletries. We also occasionally add in services like CV writing, job placements, and also medical services. So the idea from this project actually came about because my students and I used to go and volunteer with soup kitchens. So we were regular volunteers at different soup kitchens throughout Kuala Lumpur, and there's actually quite a number of them. But we found that there were already so many volunteers, especially during the semester, university semester. You have busloads of students coming in, some not quite knowing what to do. And there's just, so we tried to look and start talking to people. What are some of the other needs? And one of the things that people pointed out, and also what we observed, was when people give clothes, they tend to sort of put it on the floor, in a bundle and kind of run away because then there'll be sort of a tussle to get the clothes. And of course, people that were older and women, children would not have access to them. So we decided to then, sort of inspired also by the street store project in South Africa to sort of create a space where people were treated with dignity. We call people who come to our Kadai customers and students and also volunteers. We also have a lot of volunteers who are non-students and also students outside from who come in and serve our customers. And throughout this process, they listen to stories and get to know the community better. So this is part of the work that we've been doing for several years. We're kind of a bit of a hiatus, unfortunately, because of COVID-19. But so these are sort of this, where the stories are coming from through our interactions with the community in Jalan Pangong. If I may have the next slide. We also work, and really the stalwart of Jalan Pangong is a soup kitchen called Dapur Jalanan. And really we started volunteering with Dapur Jalanan, and they are a group that's there every week, rain or shine, pandemic, no pandemic, they are there. Really have a lot of respect for this group. And we work together with them in sort of like, planning. Kedai Jalan runs only once a month. But we do a lot of also support group and a lot of discussions of the needs with Dapojanan. And there's also another group that started a little bit later, Kita Semula, which is an arts collective. So we do activities also with them, such as an art table, which allow for children to come and do art, and even adults actually they love coming in and doing art, and we do it thematically according to whatever Chinese New Year, Hari Raya. So I mean the idea of all these also is one, yes, to provide services, but also really to understand and to understand sort of the experiences of the people who are at Jalan Pangong, and also to create a sense of community. And so, at this point, as soon as we like drive up to Jalan Pangong, like some of my volunteers say, we don't know who are the volunteers, who are the community members, because as soon as we drive up, people from the community will come and, help us unload, set up the shop, and some even help volunteer, to set up things. They give us ideas on what to do. So there's a lot of collaboration and participation with the community there. So over the years, I've gotten to know some of the regulars who come to Jalan Pangong pretty well. And so I would like to present some of the stories of people there. And some of these stories are going to be composite characters because to sort of protect the privacy, and also I'll be using pseudonyms. One of the things that, if I may have the next slide, one of the things that, I really believe in the power of stories. And of course, as an anthropologist, this is sort of my interest in sort of understanding people through their stories, right? To how they tell us about themselves. So I'd like to share with you these three stories, because I like to suggest here how we view people experiencing homelessness will influence the kind of intervention work, that we provide, in terms of assistance, policies, and laws to address the issue of homelessness. So I was very, inspired by what Dr. Boonlert's book, which has such a wide reading and change societal view of people who experience homelessness, by reading their stories. So I'd like to share here three of the stories here. First, I'd like to introduce you to Pak Ajis, a man in his 60s. I first met him when we first started Kerajan, and when he learned I was a lecturer, he was very excited to tell me about his daughter who was in university, and he had a son who was in boarding school in another state. He was very proud of their academic achievements and often updated me of where they are in their studies. Pak Ajis had a business that had gone bust, and over time, he ran out of money and ended up living on the streets. He was still a businessman at heart and was able to make some money here and there, selling small items such as socks and sarongs on the sidewalks in Bukit Bintang. He often, very excitedly will tell me sort of, what kind of items will be in season and that be able to make a lot of profit, with selling. He made enough to rent a small room at about 500 ringgit a month, and he occasionally shared it with two other friends. The space was very cramped, often had bed bugs, but it allowed for them to be off the streets. And most importantly, for someone doing business like him, he had a place to store his goods. He sent any extra money he had to his son, and because his daughter had scholarship, that he was able to send some money to his son. And a couple of times when there were extra expenses such as medical bills to pay, Pak Ajis would find himself back on the streets, sleeping on the sidewalks until the next month when he's able to make enough money for rent. The second person I want to introduce to you is Sam. Sam is from Sarawak, and he had migrated to Selangor to work at the airport, and he worked as a baggage handler for almost 20 years. But when he turned 50, he was deemed too old for this rigorous job. Younger contract workers took his place. So with his minimum wage and having sent most of his funds back home to Sarawak, he was not able to save any money. And without a job, he soon ended up living on the streets. And he got, some odd jobs here and there, for example, helping restaurants during peak hours. And sometimes the employers would allow him to sleep on the shop floor. The third person I'd like to introduce is Sally. Sally dropped out of school at 15 to take care of her grandmother. Her mother was not in the picture at this time, nor was the father. Sally's aunt and uncles did not treat her well, physically abusing her, and she ran away after the death of her grandmother at 16. And she has been living on the streets on and off for several years. When I met her, she was 21 years old and was 8 months pregnant and living under a bridge. She was nervous about applying for welfare funds because she was afraid that she may be deemed an unfit mother and her baby taken away. We were able at this point to get some funds so she could move to a rental room before the birth of her baby. And then eventually her partner found a job. And while it was, at minimum wage, they were able to continue renting a room with his salary. Though a couple of months ago, she called to say that she and her partner had a falling out, and she's really worried. She has no money to pay rent, and so I ended up going to stay at an elderly aunt's house, but she's also worried of overstaying there. So the stories and more from the people that we met in Jalanpang illustrates sort of the diversity of ways that people experience homelessness, and also there are different pathways to homelessness. Now, these stories are important because very often we only see statistics and numbers, and there's a focus on, quote unquote, the homelessness and eradicating the homeless problem, not taking into account the diversity of experiences. If I may have the next slide. So the numbers of homelessness, it ranges. There's been a few different attempts to create, census and counts. So the estimate now that many people quote is between 1,500 to 2,000 people. There was JKM Social Welfare Department survey that was done in 2010, and that was based on the people that was brought into their Desa Binadiri home, like a shelter home. So the numbers around that 1,500 to 2,000. But these numbers are actually numbers of rough sleepers, because how they do these counts is to go out, like late night, like 2 a.m., 3 a.m., and count the number of bodies that were sleeping on the sidewalk, or in terms of JKM survey, was the number of people that were brought in to stay in the shelter. So these statistics does not then capture the experiences of Pak Ajis, Sam, or Sally, and many more of the people that we meet in Jalan Pangong. If I may have the next slide. So if we sort of expand the definition of homelessness, and sort of, a lot of people have been advocating for this. There's a lot of literature on this, and sort of, the definition of homelessness. There's not one set definition in Malaysia. But if we look at sort of what is out there, homelessness can also be in these different forms, like the form that, Pak Ajay, Sam, or Sally, and many others experience, where they might have different forms, they might have secondary homelessness or tertiary homelessness. I'm sorry, I can't quite read my, my slides, so I'm just gonna, yes. So secondary homelessness are people who frequently move from one temporary shelter for another, or stay at relatives. So that's would be, the experience of Sam and Sally, for example, and also to some extent Pak Ajis, because there's times when he doesn't have enough money, and so he has to stay outside. So so these kinds of homelessness are not taken into account because we don't really listen or pay attention to these kinds of stories. So these stories also important because it illustrates the different pathways that lead to homelessness. So there is a tendency, there's a narrative, from sort of the government side, also from society, that tend to blame the condition of homelessness on individuals as personal failures, instead of focusing on situation that creates these conditions of homelessness. So if I may have the next slide. So there are many pathways that can lead to homelessness. It could be related to, affordable, not having access to affordable housing, might be economic issues, might be interpersonal issues like domestic violence or family conflicts, might be also personal attributes such as addiction, mental health or physical health. And these issues are, or these factors are interrelated and really speaks for the need for an intervention that addresses them at many different levels. So what, what I also, one of the things that I'm learning also, and, I also have to correct myself, instead of thinking of the homeless almost like an identity, we should focus on the experiences of the homelessness, which varies and changes according to the individual. So people may, be homeless at one point and then, have a shelter for another and then go back to being homeless. So these are very important, experiences to consider as we're thinking about intervention. And we also need to sort of, look at homelessness not as a condition of the person, but really, these processes that lead to homelessness, the structural inequality that leads to the condition of homelessness, and how can we better support people who experience homelessness, be able to lead out from the situation. So as I mentioned in the abstract, if I may have the next slide. In Malaysia, there is a tendency to blame, quote unquote, the homeless, and this is illustrated in the laws that shapes intervention in addressing the issue of homelessness, that is the infamous Destitute Persons Act. And it's probably not surprising to know that this law was inherited from the British colonial period and has been around since the end of 19th century. It was formerly known as the Vagrancy. Sorry, can I have the next slide, please? So it was previously known as the Vagrancy Act. And what is different is that instead of giving power to the police, it gives power to the Social Welfare Department. So you have here, the destitute person. Any person found begging in a public place in such a way that causes or likely to cause annoyance to persons frequenting the place, or an idle person found in public places, whether or not he is begging. The next slide. So this act gives power to the Social Welfare Department to take people away, people who are idle or begging, basically poor people, away, and to be able to place them into welfare homes. And if they resist, they could be subject to a charge. Police can be also part of the experience of a destitute, or what's termed as a destitute person, and this effort to sort of clean them off the streets, right? This is sort of the origins of the law, if I may have the next slides. So I just wanted to also acknowledge the work that has been done by Food Not Bombs Kuala Lumpur, and they've been for a long time been advocating for the repeal of this law. The work of Reina Risenko, who's done a lot of writing, and also coalition of NGOs that have written policy papers sort of making the case for the need to repeal this punitive and really archaic law. Every now and then there'll be an interagency operation. So, if I may have the next slides, these operation or have very benevolent names. They'll call them Ops Kasih or Ops Prihatin. Kasih meaning love and Prihatin meaning concern. But for the people on the other side experiencing these streets, they can be very traumatizing experiences where they feel they are being treated as criminals. So I just wanted to say that this picture is just an illustration. It was not actually the homeless rate, but actually this is sort of the kind of van that they would put people up into when they go, sort of in the middle of the night usually, and and have them carted away to one of the shelter homes. And very often also these ops might also coincide with events such as the SEA Games, some dignitary coming to visit Kuala Lumpur to sort of have homeless people out of sight. I wanted to share another story of Parambi. And a couple years ago, we received an urgent text from Parambi, and he said, "Please help! I'm being sent to a lockup in Sungai Buloh." So Parambi's message sort of triggered, a series of volunteers trying to figure out where he was, what can we do, how can we locate him? Because after that, we got some messages to say that he was dragged into and treated like a criminal and dragged by his collar, hauled into a truck. And so, but we didn't know where he was. So we kind of had to go looking for him. And one of our volunteers the next morning tried to look for Ramli with his description of I'm in a lockup, and thought maybe he was in a police lockup or maybe even at jail. So she went to all these different police stations in looking for him. After many inquiries, she later found that he was actually in a welfare home. But for him, his experience was like being in a jail. And later, when we were able to write letters and vouch for him, and he was released, he later told us about this experience. Placed in a locked room with 20 other people. His IC and his phone was taken away from him. So if he had not contacted us, just before his phone was taken away, we would have never found out where he was, and there was possibility that he could have been sent into an institution for up to 3 years without his consent. So, so these are kind of the experiences that people who are living on the streets, or people who are experiencing homelessness have to go through, and in their daily in their daily lives. So the fear of being incarcerated.
Sorry, Dr. Lucina, you got 1 minute to wrap up the presentation. Sorry.
Sure. So if I may have the next slide. So from a societal perspective, often the stereotypes of people experiencing homelessness is also, there's a lot of stereotypes. They're lazy, they're just wanting handouts. There's also misconception that drunks and drug addicts. So I won't go much about this because I think that was already explained also in the abstract. But I just wanted to point out that actually when the studies have actually shown a number of people that actually are drug abusers are very small, only 5%. And also there's also a misconception that they're mostly migrants, which is also untrue, where 90% are Malaysians. Very often there's also suspicion, whether soup kitchens are actually perpetuating homelessness. But, I think this kind of assumption, again, assumes the blame on the individual rather than structural inequality. Food is, after all, a necessity and a right, and denying people this right will not solve structural inequality. If I may just, I'm sorry, I know I have gone a little bit out of time. If I may just go to my last point, I'm going to skip a little bit here and go to my last point. If I may go to the next slide. I wanted to make my last point about the gendered aspect of homelessness, which is often, that is overlooked. So Sally's story earlier illustrated the gendered aspect of homelessness. When we look at official statistics, if I may look at the next slide. I'm sorry, the 2 slides before. I think this is sort of the numbers that we see in many other countries as well, that the majority are men. So visibly, we see men as homeless, and kind of research and kind of policy making tend to address homelessness using men as sort of the norm, right? But in actuality, there are women who experience homelessness. The small percentage that we see is experiencing primary homelessness, but many also experiencing secondary homelessness. If I may have the next slide. So we need to pay attention, and particularly a lot of research have shown that one of the pathways for homelessness for women is domestic violence. So women who are in shelters, and also women tend to have a bit more acceptance to stay in relatives' house, or in shelter homes. So you don't see them on the street, but they are in condition of homelessness where they are vulnerable. So I would suggest the need to sort of to look at these kinds of hidden forms of homelessness. My last slide, I think, is coming up. Thank you for sort of allowing me. what I like to point out here is that how we view people experiencing homelessness will have an impact on the kind of intervention work that we're hoping to address. So, and what I hope that I've been able to show you sort of through these stories and through the diversity of experiences of homelessness, different types of homelessness, I hope that I'm able to show you that we need to sort of move away from this framing of homelessness as a problem, of the homeless as a problem, but rather focus on the experiences of homelessness that needs to be addressed rather than punitive forms of intervention. We should provide support in addressing these many forms of social inequality. And lastly, I wanted for you to reconsider these invisible forms of homelessness, in particular the gendered aspects of homelessness. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Dr. Rusaslina, for a very inspiring and fascinating presentation. Now, finally, I would like to invite Dr. Marlon Deluna Ira to deliver your presentation entitled Two Sides of the Same Coin, Homelessness in the Philippines. So, Dr. Ira, if you're ready, you can start. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Noor. Thank you for the previous presenters. Also, I would like to thank Dr. Fernie Santiago for allowing me to be part of this very interesting webinar. I must admit that I completed my MS in Human Settlements at AIT, and that was in 1995. And from there on, I was a bit away from the issues related to housing because I dwell more on disaster-related researchers and environmental-related concerns. But nevertheless, this is an opportunity for me to um, pick up pieces and understand more about one of my first love, which is human settlements. I happened to manage a resettlement project in the Philippines after Mount Pinatubo eruption, and it was a very historical moment in my life. So today, what I'm going to share with you are the two sides of the same coin: homelessness in the Philippines. So our previous presenters shared about specific in Bangkok and I think in another city in Malaysia. So I intend to make my presentation in this order. So I'll give a brief introduction about the homelessness in the Philippines, the methodology that I use, and concepts, causes, issues, initiatives on homelessness, and conclusion. So there are approximately 4.5 homeless people in the Philippines, including children, out of 106 million people. So Dr. Boonlert mentioned that he is more or less aware of this. So I'm not proud that we have more homeless in the Philippines, no, with highest. Incidentally, most of these homeless people could be found in the National Capital Region or the Metro Manila, and the immediate region, which is the Calabarzon provinces of Cavite, Laguna, Batangas, Rizal, and Quezon. For a country that is one of the fastest growing economies in Southeast Asia, this sounds like a crisis. So, incidentally, I wasn't able to find the latest informal settler families in the Philippines, but I was able to get this data in 2011 just to show you that 10 years ago, we have only about 1 point, about these are in families, no? So 1.5 million families. To And then 10 years later, so we have in persons, no, 4 million 4.5 million, more or less. Okay. Sorry. So this presentation is based on secondary sources such as report, policy papers, articles, online materials, and I was able to conduct an interview with the City Urban Development Housing Officer in one city in the province of Laguna. With these realities expressed through numbers in the previous slide, let us first ask why people are homeless. So, um, homelessness in the Philippines. Sorry, homelessness in the Philippines is caused by a number of reasons, and such as loss of jobs, insufficient income or job instability, and of course, disasters. No, and we will discuss this in depth in a while. Um, I, a program of the DSWD, it's about the 4Ps, classified types of homeless into this. One is families of the street. These are families who live on the street for a long time. Um, and if we're going to analyze them, these are the families uh, who have usually have a push cart or kariton where their belongings are stored, no, while moving around a particular city. The second one is the community-based street families. These are families who migrated from rural to urban areas for greener pasture. And then the next one would be the displaced homeless families, are those who lost their homes due to disasters either caused by natural hazards such as typhoons or human-induced hazards such as social conflict. In the statistics shown by Dr. Ursaslina, I think a very small portion of them are children, homeless children. In the Philippines, it was recorded that approximately 250,000 are homeless children in the country, and they are the most vulnerable homeless. Because when children are on the street, they're more exposed and vulnerable to sexual exploitation, abuse, and prostitution. Although victims of circumstances which are beyond their control, um, children on the street are often viewed as criminals or future criminals, resulting in discrimination from the police. No, I think their accounts somewhat similar to the previous presentation. There's a bias, there's a prejudice against people living in the street to be potential criminals. Additionally, uh, in order to evade hunger and pain, some of them are resorting to drugs, usually using rugby. These are both external and internal factors that children face, make it very difficult for them to escape the street life. What are the causes of homelessness? We've seen a snapshot of these causes of homelessness in the country. Let us look at them in a more in-depth way. So poverty, this is caused by unemployment or low wages. Insufficient income or just job instability can make it difficult for families in the country, especially those in Metro Manila. Disasters could lead to loss of lives and assets. The homeless are usually more exposed and vulnerable. These are families living near the creeks. They are more exposed to flooding, and those are traveling with children using just a push carts or kariton are most vulnerable to exposure to extreme environmental condition. In 2019, more than 20 typhoons battered the Philippines, and one of those typhoons that hit the country damaged about 500,000 houses. A volcanic eruption that happened in January 2020 impacted 500,000 people and forced the relocation of 6,000 families. Now, with the issue of um, uh, families in the streets or those living in the danger zones defined by the government, there are accounts that saying that this was a unilateral definition of being a disaster, living in a disaster prone, because some of the people living in the disaster prone feel that they have been there for quite a while and they're able to survive, and therefore living in those places are not really disaster prone because they were able to survive. What what then are some of the issues uh, and concerns about homelessness in the Philippines? This is based on my interview with the city housing officer. So one of them is the uncontrolled growth, particularly both formal and informal settlers, meaning, of course, the growth of the population, at the same time, the increasing number of migration. And then there's the issue of more than one family per structure. I think what is the problem for this is that the violation of individual privacy. If there are two families or more than two families in one structure, one house, there will be a lot of concomitant problems. Next one is the political will of the government, no? Both from the national and the local levels to implement laws, executive uh, executive issuances, local ordinances, and other housing regulations, which are available but are not fully implemented. And one interesting thought is that there's a law about Urban Development Housing Act of 1992, or RA 7179. This was approved in 1992, but at present there's no implementing rules and regulation. So this is a difficult task to implement a law without these rules and regulation. I would like to, for the succeeding slides, I would like to share with you some of the legal basis of housing policy in the Philippines. So I'll start with the 1987 Philippine Constitution, Article 13, Social Justice and Human Rights, stating that the state shall have a program of urban land reform and housing which make available at affordable cost, which promotes adequate employment opportunities, and no demolition of ISF, informal settler families, shall take place except in accordance with law and in just and humane manner. There's also the Urban Development and Housing Act, RA 7279. This is the provision of socialized housing or settlement areas with the following basic services: health, education, communication, security, relocation, relief and welfare, and facilities ensuring that relocation areas shall be areas located near employment opportunities. One of the reasons why there are a lot of unsuccessful relocation programs in the Philippines is the problem of employment opportunities. So, if these are the legal basis, what are some of the initiatives by the government and non-governmental organizations to address homelessness? The government programs include the Modified Conditional Cash Transfer for homeless street families. This program provides financial support such as housing grants and funding for health and education to homeless families, particularly in Metro Manila. This is not exhaustive, but I came across these NGOs, initiatives of two NGOs in the Philippines. One of them is the ASMAE. ASMAE Philippines is a French international solidarity NGO specializing in child development programs, and they have been operating in the Philippines since 1989. The organization also provides children with school support as well as supporting other NGOs in the area. The other one is Kanlungan sa Erma Ministry Incorporated, is another organization that works to educate street children through projects that teach children about hard work while providing them with an income. ERMA stands for Kanlungan sa Ermita Malate Ministry. So it's a temporary shelter. Recently, I was informed 2018, 2019, the Department of Interior and Local Government came up with a resettlement governance program. So the purpose of which is, I think with the issue of the sending local government or the sending cities and the receiving cities, the Department of Interior and Local Government came up with this program. So specifically, they provide assistance in forms of funds, and then technical assistance to capacitate the local government units in the course of resettlement. And of course, they facilitated the inter-LGU. They facilitated from the sending local government to the receiving local government arrangements, so that there will be less tensions between the two parties. Interesting to note that these particular programs also involve a lot of other programs such as resettlement action plans, disaster preparedness, peace and order, solid waste management, and livelihood development. And of course, a capacity development training. So in a nutshell, these resettlement programs is a complete menu or gamut of different programs and services that will help the local government units in addressing their resettlement concerns. Now, what is interesting, I think this is a milestone in the housing and development issues in the Philippines, is the passing of a law creating the Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development. Just a background, in the 70s, during the Marcos era, Marcos regime, we have a Ministry of Human Settlements, but it was until in 1986 when the new government was in place, so the Ministry of Human Settlement was defunct. Since then, the housing issue in the Philippines is handled by the HLURB, the Housing and Land Use Regulatory Board, and the Housing and Urban Development Coordinating Council, which are two separate entities and working both for urban development and housing. So in February 14, 2019, this law was approved, and the Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development is now in place. In addition to this, what is the importance of this department? So this is now the department that will be primarily concerned with the management of housing, human settlements, and urban development. It shall be the sole and main planning and policy making and regulatory program coordination and performance monitoring entity for all housing, human settlements, and urban development concerns, primarily focusing on the access to and affordability of basic human needs. It shall develop and adopt a national strategy to immediately address the provisions of adequate, affordable housing to all Filipinos, and shall ensure the alignment of the policies, programs, and projects of all its attached agencies to facilitate the achievement of these objectives. So it is interesting to note that at the national government level, there is already a department that will look into the policy and the programs and implementation. At the local level, there are provisions of Republic Act 7160, the local government code, which prepares the local government units in the provision of basic services for low-cost housing and other mass dwelling. This also helped them to prepare local plans such as comprehensive land use, zoning ordinance, comprehensive development plan, and local shelter plans. So, and of course, there are other details that I think it's too much to present, but just to let you know that there are also local special bodies that will take care of the housing and urban development concerns at the local government level. When I say local government, I'm referring to provincial, municipal, and city and barangay. Barangay is the lowest political unit in the Philippines, which is, I think, this is tambon, or this is a village or community level from other countries. There's also an establishment of local housing board and local interagency committee, and this also provides guidelines for the formulation of homeowners associations to address concerns relating to activities and concerning housings and informal settler families. Okay, these are some of the initiatives in the one city that I was able to interview. Okay, so So these slides that I'm sharing with you are manifestations that more or less the issue of housing is a serious concern in the Philippines, and I would safely conclude that from the national government, it's now becoming a priority issue, having a new department or ministry that will look into the housing issue and concern in the Philippines. At the same time, this is also um, um, translated at the local government units, which will handle the nitty-gritty of housing, urban development concerns at the city, provincial, and barangay level. So, in conclusion, it came to me as a surprise that we have this a lot of initiatives in the Philippines, and of course, it's interesting to note that the Philippines is one of the countries with most number of homeless people. So, in conclusion, the Philippine government, both national and local government, as well as NGOs, have made efforts to help the homeless population. Much more still needs to be done. Moving forward, there's a need to introduce more initiatives to respond significantly to the prevailing homelessness in the different parts of the Philippines. Likewise, addressing homelessness in the country would require a holistic development approach, which I think the different laws will take care of. This must be an efficient and effective housing program that is comprehensive to address complex systems on poverty reduction, employment, and resilience. The new Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development, which was approved in 2019, which have a promising role to play in responding to the complex housing problem of the country. Having a background on human settlements, it triggered my interest to pursue more studies in the future. I hope I will be able to have the opportunity to also hear the voices of the homeless in the Philippines, particularly those in the cities of Metro Manila, so their voices will be heard, so that we will make people understand them better at this juncture. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ira, for your very informative presentation. Now we have listened to our three very interesting speakers. They have presented a lot. I think I'm sure we have learned a lot from each of them uh, in terms of homeless, shelter and housing policy in the context of Thailand, Malaysia and Philippines. I now open this session for some questions. We have about 20 minutes for Q&A. Participants are welcome to ask questions to the speakers. You can either raise your hand or post your question in the chat box. I appreciate if you could post your question as short and sweet as possible and direct your question to any of the speakers, right? Because you're pressing for time. Right, so let me take the first question. Participants are welcome to ask questions. Any question?
Dr. Malina, there's a question by Dr. Joseph Go on the Q&A. Is it okay to answer that?
Yes, please. You may answer the question straight away, yes.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I'll read the question, or would Dr. Joseph like to read the question?
Which one is it?
All right, so I'll just read. So the question is about another crucial gender perspective of homelessness that need to be considered beyond the binary identities of men and women involves transgender women and to lesser extent transgender men in KL. In this instance, homelessness is propelled by factors surrounding transgender identity, and transgender identity inevitably ties in intimately with structural inequalities, which often remain uncontested. What are your thoughts on this matter? Thank you so much, Dr. Joseph Go, for that question. You are absolutely right. Kind of rushing at the end there, but definitely, transgender are not only they face discrimination in terms of accessing social welfare services. At times, it can be very dangerous for them to, to be able, for example, to go to hospitals, to be able to, go to places where they can get social services, because they can, instead of getting services, they might be penalized for, dressing differently, or sort of having a different gender identity to whatever their identity card would say. So definitely is a very big issue in terms of vulnerability. A lot of youth who maybe are shunned out by their families once they sort of take on a transgender identity, or sort of would like to express it, also are vulnerable to being, not having a home because they're thrown out from their family. So definitely these are some of the issues that I definitely take your point and would like to consider more. I think there's definitely need to be more research in terms of the lived experiences of transgender people, non-gender conforming community. There are a couple of shelters in Kuala Lumpur that are creating spaces for transgender who are experiencing homelessness, but definitely I'm sure there's more that needs to be done on this issue.
Right, thank you, Dr. Rusaslina. I see there's another question posted by Jocelyn Go. I think this question is for Dr. Visetpricha. He is interested to know why the temples that are open their doors to the homeless do so, and what are the philosophical underpinnings in these inclusive temples that differs from the more exclusive temples. So, Dr. Visetpricha.
Thank you very much for your question, Joseph. So actually, previously is like a basic principle in Buddhist that the monk or temple should help the poor. So in the past, even though in today's the poor family will send their children go to the temple to live with the temple, to eat with the monk, and can learn in the temple and go to the school like this. So it's basic principle that that Buddhists, that monk and temples or Buddhists should help the poor. So to making it a kind of to making merit for themselves to do the good thing, and therefore it actually it's simple that the monk should give the food, because actually every morning the people give food to monk a lot more than they need, and it's normal that the monk will give the food to the others, to the poor. So this is normal. But for the homeless, there are some kind of the problem that the monk prefer to give the food for the poor. Actually, those for come from the province. So on the first few weeks or the first few days, they don't know how to survive in the Bangkok. So the monk prefer to give them. But when the monk realized that, oh, these people, you come to the temple every morning, they change their attitude. They think, oh, maybe you are too lazy to work. So you rely on a food every morning. So therefore the homeless cannot rely on the temple every morning. So they have sometimes some people they might change to go to this temple this morning. On the next day they might go to another place. This is maybe one of the tactics that they work. And another tactic is that they have to make a relationship with the monk. So for some people, they go to their temple in the morning. They help monk to clean the temple, like that. And that's it. Very simple practice. And then the monk will give them food like this. This is actually is the basic principle in Buddhism that should help the poor to make merit. I hope I answer your questions.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Boonlert. I see a participant raise her hand. Nurhaizan Jahasan, do you have any question to the panelists? Nurhaizan Jahasan. Right. All right. In the meantime, there's also another question in the Q&A chat box. question from Han Bing Ong. What is the best way to tackle the homeless in Penang? I'm not sure who wants to respond to this question. Dr. Rusaslina, do you have any comment on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the question how to tackle homelessness in Penang, I think would be the same, probably the same question, how to tackle homelessness in Kuala Lumpur. Though of course the numbers in Penang would be smaller. I'm not quite sure what the numbers are right now. I think there's a debate between.
Hello, I want to ask about CPD points for nurses. Thank you.
CPD points. Okay, I think I have to direct this question to the secretariat or the organizers.
Can I finish answering that question?
Yes, please do.
Yeah. All right. So there's a debate between sort of the approach to job first or housing first. So I think now for the social welfare department, there's a focus on housing, the job first. So places like Anjong Kasih, which is like a shelter halfway home, focus on people who are sort of just either recently experiencing homelessness or sort of have been experiencing homelessness but interested in sort of being able to have to enter the workforce. So the focus is trying to get them to get jobs, and in fact that's sort of like one of the rules of being able to stay there, that within X number of months you have to get a job, and then the assumption that is that once you get a job then everything will be fine. Well, of course what researchers have found that because pathways to homelessness is so complex, it involves a lot of many different things. Just getting a job doesn't necessarily address all the other issues. You still have unaffordable housing, you still have very low minimum wage, and a lot of times people might take advantage of the fact that there's some people are desperate to get jobs, and so they might offer very minimum wage. There's still a lot of other issues of might be personal or interpersonal factors as well. So on the other side is people who are advocating for housing first, and we see this in examples in Finland and New York City, where the first point of intervention is to get housing. So once people get housing, then an envelope of different kinds of services will be then given to the individuals based on whatever their needs are. Might be, addiction help, might be, financial management help, might be getting job employment, might be other forms of, physical health, mental health issues. But the idea is that once you are able to be in a stable environment, having a home will be a starting point, and then then you work towards being able to tackle the other things. So there's a sort of debate between these two ways of mode, and I lean more towards the idea of housing first, sort of thinking about some of the initiatives that has occurred in Malaysia. But of course, I also know some NGOs that have sort of focused on trying to get housing as sort of the point of entry, but it is a lot of resources and expertise as well that needs to be in there to cater for each individual, in terms of it's not just about giving a house and a job, but also other kinds of support systems. So I really feel that there needs to be more investment by the government for these kinds of social services. We need more social workers. We need more social workers on the street, instead of instead of having this kind of punitive types of measures. So instead of funding ops and things like that, more funds should go into social services.
All right, thank you, Dr. Rusaslina. I see several more questions. Let's see, this question from Boon Ki Ong is a general question. Why still so many homeless if exclude drug addicts? And why not drug addicts sent to jail to minimize social problems? It's kind of stigmatized question here, but any of the speakers would like to respond? Dr. Ira, any comment on this?
I think at present you may be aware of the very aggressive campaign of the Philippine government against drug. So I think when I mentioned about in the past when children are being observed taking rugby to forget their hunger and forget the pain. I think this kind of situation may not happen anymore because of the aggressive, because of the presence of the enforcers, especially in the street. So those activities that they have been done before may not be possible at present. So I think they will that kind of illegal activities being done before may not be allowed anymore in the presence of the enforcers, especially.
Right, thank you. Another question from anonymous attendee. Is there a safe space for non-gender confirming or transgender homeless people in all three countries? Because these people face a lot of discrimination. So maybe a quick response. We start from Dr. Boonlert. Do you have any comment on this in Thailand context? You have to unmute yourself, Dr. Boonlert. We can't hear you.
That in Thailand, there are transgender homeless people also. And from my observation, I found that the transgender homeless people, I found them as a group. When these people live on the street, I found that they have a group and then they support and help themselves. So I go further to this question. Like we need to ask how the women live on the streets. We know that to be a woman on the street is quite dangerous more than men. So my observation is that if the woman doesn't find a partner, another way to survive on the street is they will live as a group. So from my observation also, the transgender, they always live as a group on the street. And another answer is that actually the question, I'm not sure what the implication of the question. My feeling is that actually on the streets, it's not dangerous as we think. People on the street, they have some kind of norm. They don't bully each other easily as we think. I think there are some kind of norm. I was in the Philippines for quite more than a year. So sometimes you will see the Sika in Tagalog. Sometimes you will see sometimes bully other people. But actually, people have a norm. Even though on the street, they have a norm to not to live peacefully, to avoid the problem. So I think there's some kind of course for the transgender, they might be sensitive to be treated, but they have one tactical is to have a friend and group on the streets.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Maybe Dr. Sasrina, in Malaysian context, short response from you regarding this question.
Yes, I think I mentioned earlier. There's the one that I know. There's two shelter homes. One is PKKUM, and another one I forgot the name, but it's run or is associated with Nisha Ayub. So there are some spaces, but they're always they have limited space and capacity, and they're always underfunded. Continuously having to raise funds to maintain it because they don't get any institutional support. So yeah, there are some spaces, but they don't have much support.
All right, thank you. Dr. Ira, how about in the Philippines?
Yeah, I think as mentioned by Dr. Boonlert, I think relatively a transgender would have a safe space, no, even in the street, no. In fact, in mass media, most of the time they're the subject of discussion and maybe highlighting the creativity, contribution to arts, contribution to society, things of those sort. And I think there are now discussions like they are being part, for example, of the military service, in education. So they're now gaining grounds on spaces which before are not welcome for this kind of orientation.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Ira. Now, next question from Nur Ain Afika. how NGO identified real homeless people. Some people take advantage to rent freely. I see Dr. Ira has been nodding, so why don't
Yeah.
you start with a quick
Yeah, I before I well, Dr. Boonlert, I live in Thailand for 4 years because I studied in AIT and I work with
80, okay.
ADPC. Yeah, but before leaving for Thailand, I work with an after leaving Thailand, I work with an NGO in the Philippines, and I think uh, most of the NGOs, for example, are operating a halfway home shelter. So these are usually the officers or the staff of the NGOs are the one really finding the people who will be staying. So these are usually they conduct, for example, a collateral interview, or they observe, no, and maybe they get maybe referral from proper authorities or proper people who have the knowledge. So I think the least chances of people who will be availing of the NGO services that they will be abused because they wanted to avail of free rent, no. I think they are usually the qualified beneficiaries of a particular service. In fact, one of the things that I observed, most of the children who were strongly or enforcedly put in halfway home are not happy because they are confined and they have very limited activities to do. So they have to observe the orderly programs, that they have to wake up early, they have to engage in cleaning, etc., which I think they do not like because they want to be in the street to roam around and do what they want. No, I think those are some observations. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Dr. Ira. I think the last question for today from Boon Hee Ong again. I think this question is asking about is there any training program by the government, right? Because I think Dr. Rusasina mentioned in your presentation about the kind of programs that have been implemented for the homeless, apart from donating food donation, also some kind of training
Mhm.
program. Maybe you would like to highlight that again, Dr. Rusaslina? A training program by the government for the homeless people so that they can get job after that.
It's okay if I also address the question earlier, how NGO identify real homeless people, because this is a question that people ask me all the time. How do you know they're really homeless? And of course we give clothes and things like that. People are like, how do you know that they're not going to sell these clothes? So I think for us is about creating this space where people feel safe. If they need the food or they need the clothes, they will come and queue up and take food or clothes. And because we want to create a safe space, we don't interrogate. We assume that whoever come is able have the right to food and clothes and toiletries or whatever that we're providing that time. So I think this goes to sort of treating people who experience homelessness with dignity. Not that they have to like prove, like, yes, I'm really homeless, I really need this food. But anyone who, come to get food are welcome. I also wanted to share this experience a few years ago. And I was quite upset with this experience because, there was a group that was providing food really late at night, sort of going around and putting food where people were sleeping. And they found that this one man came, picked up the food, and then went to his car. And for them, having a car was an indication that this person was not homeless and therefore not deserving of food. And so this group of volunteers, chased this car, or like went to this car, it was parked, and started shaking the car and accusing this man of taking food that he does not deserve. Now, if we sort of maybe, try to understand that there's many different experiences of homelessness, he might be sleeping in the car, he might not have any food once he drives back home, for example, then, sort of you're able to then provide the kind of services that's needed for a wider range of people, right? So I think the society needs to sort of open their minds as well to sort of understand there's so many different forms of experiences of homelessness, and that, you know, what is our role in society, you know, at the very least providing food. But it's true that just providing food, and I think maybe that's to the next question, just providing food will not solve the problem. But food is a right, and sort of this is sort of, I believe in this, and that people should have access to it. But yes, it's definitely. So there's a lot of NGOs, and we do have this problem where sometimes there's lack of coordination among NGOs, and we have an overabundance of food being provided, especially during you know, Christmas, Hari Raya, like so much food that, or Ramadan, that there's a lot of waste. And so there is a need of coordination where you know, some of these services need to be some coordination. That I think the first entry, the easiest way of people trying to help is through giving food. And so I think that, you know, sort of the evolution of NGOs also sort of as they're growing and sort of reflecting, I see some of the NGOs also moving away from providing food to more about job training and job placements and things like that. So I think this is something that we do need to reflect more on. I take that point, and we need to improve on these kinds of intervention.
Right, thank you. Finally, probably Dr. Boonlert, some last comment about this question about training program or a rehab program to prepare to help the homeless to get jobs in the future. Yes.
I think actually by training I am an anthropologist. I think the problem of the obstruction to help the homeless people is we don't have enough field worker who work with the homeless. I would say that particularly at first the government official, they rarely walk on the street to meet the people. They go to the street just for their event. They go to give something, take a picture, take a photograph, and show that we already work for the homeless. This is, I comment directly. The second one, as I said, when I present that, nowadays people perceive homeless people as the poorest among the poor. So many people, I want to help the poor, I want to help the poor. And the easy way that they can do it to give food. They feel good that, oh, I already help the poor, I give food for the people. But I strongly propose that giving food alone is not enough. We need to do more than that. So for answer the question why we don't have the counseling service, why don't have, the problem is we don't have enough social worker who work on the street. And NGO, only a few organizations that really work with the people. I can say that in Bangkok, a few NGO work with the people, and then many programs come to attach this program. Oh, I work with you too. I work with you too. I support you too. But we have nobody work by heart with the homeless. I would say that this is very critical issue, and the government maybe provide a lot of budget, and the budget is not directly benefit to the poor. The training program, they know already, because when you help, if you want to help the people, and many people, they adjust themselves with the street culture already. Sometimes they find that they can work one day and then they want to take a rest. They don't want to be work every day as we already, they don't have this, they don't want to discipline as we do. So to adjust these people, they take time. It takes time to help them, to support them. But if you don't have the person to work with the people closely like this, many programs is just on the paper. This my feeling is like this. And go back to the question that how can we distinguish between the real homeless and not real homeless? I agree that the Dr. Rasina says, actually, I cannot feel that the benefits of being the homeless is much enough to can motivate someone to say that, oh, I am homeless, to get the benefit. Actually, to be homeless, I think how much you can get the benefits, just free food, some free food, and sometimes the quality is not good. And sometimes, but what you have to pay is that sometimes the feeling that you might be treated, discriminated by the people. So I don't think we can, it's not difficult to distinguish. And many people like to say that, oh, you don't think I am homeless? I have a house. I just hang out on the street. Don't misunderstand that I'm homeless. I think the reaction of the people would be like this. So not a few people want to pretend that, oh, I am homeless to get something. Maybe in the Philippines, sometime during the Christmas season, many people will get biyaya, or sometimes people who live in the slum, in the informal settlement, want to sleep on the street because they can get biyaya, some kind
Blessing.
of blessing
Blessing.
from, yes, during the Christmas seasons. But I think they are poor. Nobody, we don't should think that the poor will cheat. It's not a kind of cheat. They work for survive. They do it for surviving. Compared to the political cheat for corrupt, I think it's the different scale.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Boonlert. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid we have reached the end of our international webinar for today. So thank you to our three distinguished speakers, Dr. Ira, Dr. Rusasina, and Dr. Boonlert. I would like to now pass back to our MC, Dr. Fernando, for some closing words. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Malina. Homelessness is a shared experience across Southeast Asia. Unfortunately, it affects the lives of millions, our brothers and sisters in the region. They need our attention, compassion, and care. And our webinar this afternoon was a humble effort by scholars of the region to address their needs. I hope that by keeping the homeless in our conversations, we will continue to develop and share ideas that will inspire others, especially those in a position to also make a difference in the lives of others, to give the homeless the security and comfort deserved by every human being. Now, on behalf of the University Science Malaysia School of Social Sciences and De La Salle University Southeast Asia Research Center and Hub, I'd like to thank our speakers, Dr. Boonlert Visetpricha, Dr. Rusaslina Idrus, and Dr. Marlon Era for sharing their time and expertise. Dr. Noor Malina Malek for moderating very well, and Dr. Por Hyung Hong for conceptualizing the theme and coordinating the speakers. And of course, our guests for spending your afternoon with us. So thanks, and I wish you all a pleasant afternoon and evening. Thank you.
Bye-bye.